This podcast is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute professional medical advice. The information presented on this podcast are my own personal views, opinions, and summaries of research. Always consult your physician regarding any medical concerns, conditions, or treatments. Hi everyone, welcome back for another episode of It's Not You, It's Me. So as you might have seen on my social media, I recently shared the first page of my symptom tracking, and I used the daily record of severity of problems for diagnosis of PMDD, which is way too long of an official title. But I'm currently working on the next page of it because I at least want to have 2 months worth of each method of tracking because I want to try different ones. But it was really interesting to see how my emotions just go all over the place during that luteal phase. And I had some extreme ratings. It was a rating of 1 through 6, 6 being extreme. And where I had those, I had them in a couple places, like feeling angry or irritable, which I knew was one of my main symptoms, having less interest in activities and trouble concentrating, and also bloating. And I swear to God, I look like I'm 2 to 3 months pregnant with some of the bloat that I get. But I also shared my tracking with my boyfriend and talked to him about how you can visually see that my symptoms drop off as soon as my period starts. Like, it's kind of crazy. But I'm looking forward to seeing how this next month is going to go. It's already seemed a little bit better. I'm not sure what's exactly different, or if I'm maybe just handling things better, like laughing things off more or what. I don't know, but it seems a lot more manageable this time. But for all I know, next cycle is going to be completely different and I'm going to be a raging, irritable bitch. I don't know. So one thing I've been thinking about lately is about the interactions with doctors. In reading stories about women who are not getting diagnosed and those that have shared stories with me, it makes me very thankful that I had a doctor that was able to diagnose me right away. But in looking back on it, I think that trying me on Yaz for a little while was about all that came of it. Like, as best as I can remember in my visits with her, there was no talk about any other methods of treatment. And I don't know if that's because she was unaware at the time, there really wasn't any info. I really don't know. But one thing I've been wanting to do is get my hands on my health records from my time with her to see if and what the notes were about my symptoms, if she noted about when she diagnosed me with PMDD, what our conversations were about, because this is like over 15 years ago, so I'm not going to remember these things. But in order to get a copy, I was told that I need to have a current gynecologist established for them to share those records. So I've yet to do that because it's been kind of challenging to get in to see anyone. But once I do establish my care with them, I do want to get a copy of those records to see what's going on, or what happened rather. But in retrospect, I should have asked her more about it. I don't know why I did, but I was in my early 20s at the time, so still pretty young and naive. I should have asked if there were other treatments available aside from the birth control. Maybe asked if there was a group of women she knew that I could talk to about things. And in addition to that, I've also been thinking about my doctor's visits after that in the years, following, and not specifically just to my gynecology visits. That's based on the patient intake form where it asks if you've been diagnosed with any other conditions. Well, I've listed PMDD on that, but no one has ever brought it up to me. And here's where I can get caught up in making my own stories again. Like, I wonder if the physician didn't really look at my record properly and didn't see it. Maybe they didn't want to bring it up to me. Maybe they didn't know what it was and didn't want to bring it up. Who knows? But knowing the emotional and physical symptoms that can come with PMDD, you think someone would think that it's a good idea to check in with the patient. Like, how are you doing with that? How have your symptoms been? How have you been managing? Or some type of check-in question, but that has not happened, at least that I can recall. So it got me thinking that when I finally do get a new primary care provider and gynecologist established, if they don't ask me anything about it after my first visit with them, I'll bring it up to them at the end of the visit. Like, hey, did you see on my chart that I have PMDD? And from there, open up a discussion. I'm thinking it's going to go either one of two ways. Either they know what that is or they don't. But either way, I think it'll be a good conversation to have. So I guess my point is don't be afraid to ask questions and to bring up your PMDD. Okay, I'm off my soapbox now and we'll move on. But I thought it would be worth sharing some of these thoughts because maybe I'm not the only one that has them. One thing I wanted to briefly go back to, because I had tweeted about it but hadn't discussed it here, were the findings from the study from 2013 looking at what kind of information women were being exposed to on the internet in regards to PMDD. These researchers, they used Google, Yahoo, and Bing, and used the first 50 results from each service when they searched for PMDD or premenstrual dysphoric disorder. I can't remember the exact terminology that they used. But I thought it was interesting that they noted a different study that had found that women with PMDD were 5 times more likely to have internet use disorder than women without PMDD. And I remember this conversation coming up in a different discussion that maybe the higher use of the internet is just our way during that like PMDD luteal zone phase, which just allows us to zone out when brain fog, sadness, isolation, all those things kind of hit. And with the internet and YouTube being at our fingertips and right in the palm of our hands, we have that easy access of ways to distract ourselves. I mean, I can get lost in Pinterest probably for a good hour. But I'm also guessing that some of that use is trying to find ways to manage PMDD symptoms or searching for more info as well. But in going back to this study, looking at what info people are getting, they scored different sites on 7 different items. And these were ownership, authorship, source, currency, interactivity, navigability, and balance. Now, of course, they go into more detail in the article, but one of the main concerns was a lack of information and at times a lack of correct or whole information. Like, for example, a site would list a treatment option, but not provide the details about its use or effectiveness, so it's giving readers little to go on. Another concern was that it was often difficult to determine when the site and or information had been updated. Now, both of the concerns, I think, are pretty big, especially if people are turning to the information on the website to self-diagnose, not just for PMDD, but for anything, really. And more so if people are using that information to get their plans of treatment. If they see, like, take Advil for this or this for that, they're relying on that information is accurate, it's current, and it's effective. So just keep these things in mind when you're online searching for any information about PMDD and anything really. Because, there's a joke that you go on to WebMD, you enter your symptoms, and, I could have sneezing and itchy eyes and I have cancer. Like, information's not always accurate. You want to know where it's coming from. You want to know how current it is too, because it might be outdated. So I thought today we could talk a little about PMDD and work. Aside from my own personal experience with having PMDD while in the workplace, I read a study from 2017 about it. So when I'm at work and I'm feeling my symptoms happening, I will usually keep to myself more. Like, I'm not as chatty, not as goofy. If someone asks me a question, I just give a short, direct, brief answer. I also feel a lot less patience with people. I'm more in the zone, like with my own music, just focusing on my work and not really having interactions with anyone. And while I've heard of women scheduling meetings and tasks like outside of the luteal phase, which I'm sure is a huge help, the world isn't perfect and it feels nearly impossible to be able to schedule a lot of things in my life around my symptoms. So I just basically deal with them. Like, I doubt a whole program is going to restructure when certain things happen just because I may not feel on top of my game, which I guess kind of is a whole other discussion and perspective. But moving on, well, one is the obvious phase of PMDD in the workplace, which is the actual work being effective, the productivity. But there's actually another phase that follows, And in this phase is where the feelings of guilt and overcompensatory uh, behaviors happen. That didn't sound right. Overcompensatory? Am I saying that right? But some women feel bad that they have to take the day off work due to their symptoms or because they said or did something out of character. So from the interviews that they did in this study, they found that women would often overcompensate their premenstrual behaviors by going into work earlier the next day or taking work home with them or working through their lunch because they had that guilt about how less productive they were or maybe how they snapped at certain people and they're trying to make up for it. They kind of put that on themselves. Again, everyone is different. I can say that I've not shared in any of these experiences, but I've worked through lunches before just because there can be so much work to do sometimes, and it's just my personal work ethics that are pushing me to do that. But I get and I can see why some women go that route though, to kind of overcompensate for how they were. And it's unfortunate, it's unfortunate that we feel guilty about needing to take time to take care of ourselves, to make sure that we're okay. And there shouldn't be anything wrong with that, and we shouldn't feel guilty about it. But I mean, unfortunately, this is kind of the world we're living in. Some people can be a little bit better about it than others. But that kind of led into another part of the discussion in this paper about what workplaces can do to better support those that have PMDD. So of the women that they interviewed for this study, the most consistent problem that they found was that women said there was a lack of organizational awareness about PMDD, which, I mean, not really a huge surprise. So many people in general are unaware of this and what it does to us. So I'm not surprised that big organizations or even, any organization of any size is unfamiliar with it. And of the women that were interviewed, those that chose to let their employers know about their symptoms, unfortunately, and it kind of angered me, experienced negative reactions from them. Like some managers did not want to know about their hormonal issues. And then they also felt pressured by it. And I wanted to share this. It was a statement taken from one of the interviews with one of the participants that she shared her manager's response. And it was, oh, you have got such a lot of hospital appointments, and how long is this going to go on for? Like, that's a really shitty response to ask someone or say to someone that's coming to you with like, hey, I've got this issue and I need support. Like asking like, oh, really? How long it's going to take? That's like when someone's feeling sad after a tragedy and someone asking like, oh, are you going to be sad for any longer? Like, when are you going to get over this? It's like, that's just horrible. And what really pissed me off was that some received disciplinary action for sharing their responses and taking the time that they need. And despite seeking help from their HR departments, they were unable to get the help. So definitely more needs to be done in organizations to be aware of and supportive of mental health issues. I mean, that's just a given. I don't know why this isn't already happening. But along with the negative interactions, there were some that had positive experience after sharing their PMDD diagnosis and, explained everything to their managers. There were some that wanted to know more about the condition, some that wanted to have meetings about what they could do to help. So luckily for those women, I mean, to find an employer or to find people in general that are supportive, that can be a huge hurdle. So luckily there is hope. There are people out there that will listen. And I wanted to share another quote from a participant in this study about her positive experience. She said, most women, I'm sure, would never feel comfortable letting their workplace know this. But I told my boss, all my bosses, and all my coworkers know. And it's actually helped because I can come in and say, I'm in my bad time. I apologize. I'm going to work my hardest to not make this affect you. And everyone has been truly understanding. Yeah, I feel lucky for that, but I wish every woman had that opportunity in their workplace. Isn't that the truth? I wish that too. But even those women that were open and shared their symptoms and diagnosis with their employer, they were also still a little apprehensive about saying too much because they didn't want to be judged or seen as unprofessional or wanting special treatment. Now, I can relate to that because, well, I did share with my coworkers about PMDD was it last month during PMDD Awareness Month when I did my little PowerPoint. Um, Even though I let them know like this happens in me, that there are times I just feel like my brain is going haywire, I didn't want it to be an excuse for my behavior. Like if I am rude to someone and all that, I mean, it's not okay for them to just like take it because of what's going on with me. Like that's not an excuse. But I did want at least want them to have an understanding so I can get why these women feel that way. And then several participants in their study did not want to disclose their condition because there's that fear of being stigmatized. And it's difficult to have those kind of conversations with people with a very something that's so personal. And the participants in the study also highlighted and spoke about the importance of having support and legal protection as well when speaking about PMDD to their employer. They felt that treating PMDD as a disability and receiving support mechanisms that are similar to other mental disorders or conditions like being able to work from home or having a flexible work schedule would help them or when those in general that have PMDD work with their employers with that. And I also felt that having someone at their workplace to speak about PMDD, someone that understands the health and legal policies would be beneficial. Now, it didn't quite say whether that would be, a medical professional in the workplace, as far as a psychologist, an HR person. They weren't too specific about that, but just having, I think, an advocate at the workplace would make a difference. It was really neat how this study broke the PMDD experience in the workplace into different phases. Like obviously, yes, there is the one where you're experiencing the symptoms, it's happening, it's affecting your work, it's affecting your productivity, and then there's that guilt that comes later after it. And they did cite some other study that researchers had proposed those feelings about guilt and everything were a form of self-policing or self-induced punishment, which, I mean, I guess I can see that because it's, there's this, not a stigma, I'm blanking on the word right now, but, this idea that women need to be perfect. We need to be a quote unquote good woman and demonstrating good behavior and acting a certain way. And when we don't, there are some people that feel that we're not being good, I guess, or not being that ideal good woman, which is just a big societal issue, culture issue that needs to get changed. I don't want to say get broken, maybe, but women need to not feel this kind of pressure or have this kind of pressure put on them to be, quote unquote good. You can't see her, but I'm doing air quotes here. Now, in the discussion of this article, I wanted to read this because it's just written so well, and I can't think of a better way to sum it up. But in general, the findings of the present study may support the view that rather than being a passive victim, quote, of the condition that cannot be changed, the ways in which women with PMDD perceive themselves, their role, and how they react could be influencing their experience of premenstrual distress at work. So to me, that kind of sounds like it's everything, like the PMDD itself, how the expectations that we have place upon ourselves in our roles as well, and all that just kind of affecting everything really. And I don't think just in the workplace, but it kind of filters over into home too. But for this purpose, we're trying to focus on work. But There were obviously limitations to this study. Of course, this is an experience of all women with PMDD, all people with PMDD. Like, this isn't just kind of one study, like, oh, that's it. This is how it happens everywhere. It's different for everyone. And if you've got a story about it, I would love to hear it. You can send me a voice message, tweet, Instagram, whichever your preferred method. I would like to hear it. I was lucky that my boss, my direct supervisor, and my coworkers were very interested in all this and were open about it and, offered me their support. But if I were to take this to the higher ups, and I've also thought about contacting our own HR department to see what the policies are, or if there are any policies in place regarding mental illness and like taking mental health days from work, because I'm curious what their stance is. I mean, I will take my own time off and call it my mental health day, but as far as there's being a specific mental health day in our policy, I don't know that that exists. But in general, a good life balance makes for, a happier person all around, both at home and in the workplace. Like, there's got to be that balance. We can't put this pressure on ourselves to be productive and be at our top 100% all the time. Life happens. Things will happen. We're going to have bad days, and we need to be able to take that time for ourselves and do what we need to do without feeling guilty or bad about it, and then coming back later like, oh, I'll stay later, I'll come in earlier. Like, no, like, you just need to do what you need to do and not fear any repercussions from that. Another limitation of the study was that women were required to have already had a diagnosis of PMDD. It was not something that the researchers tested for. These participants were self-reported, diagnosed, like, yes, I have PMDD. So it's possible that maybe some did not. Maybe it was PMS, or who knows? Maybe there was a mistake in their diagnosis. So there's that as well. But I think the feelings and everything, like, I don't think it necessarily discredits the findings that they got. They were all still very valid points. I think a lot of the things that everyone can agree on, because unfortunately some women have lost jobs, whether by choice or at their own will, because of how debilitating these symptoms can be. And that's what's so frustrating. It's like, people just don't get it. And by people, I mean employers. They don't understand, like, unless you're actually experiencing this thing, it's very hard for someone to empathize and know what it's like. Like, seriously, I know I have this task to do, but I can't focus on it right now, and I want to cry. I want to throw my computer out the window, because that's a feeling I have had before. And there just definitely needs to be something in place, something to help support women. And like most of the studies and articles that I've read, this one is also saying, like, more research needs to be done, more studies needs to be done, which I tell you is like the common theme of a lot of these articles. So, I mean, the push is there, but researchers, counting on you all, need to actually do the work and, get these out to people, to providers, get them to actually give a diagnosis and help people. So I wanted to end this podcast by sharing a little bit of my creation process for these, because I'm an organized person by nature, and because of the work I do, I need to track so many different things. Now I'll tell you all about it maybe in another episode, but I'm basically tracking compliance things and records for about 48 people. And we're always working like 3 months in advance. Like, we're June now, so we're actually working in September stuff. So I'm needing to be very detailed and stuff. So for my episodes, I'll often write out an outline or some sort of loose script for each episode. And I do this to help keep me on topic, so I don't end up rambling and going off on some weird tangent. But I also do it because sometimes I'll record episodes during my PMDD week, and if I don't have a plan, brain fog will take over, and I somehow go from talking about treatments, going from treatments to how to bake a cake to arguing why Lucky Charms is the best cereal ever, which we can agree to disagree on. But before I create these outlines or scripts, I do a lot of reading and note taking. And sometimes it feels a little overwhelming to decide on a topic for each episode because there's just so much under the PMDD umbrella that I know I can eventually get to and can, but I'm always torn like, well, what needs to be next? What feels more important? But once I get everything decided and together, I'll usually lock myself in our bedroom or I'll sit in our living room when no one's home, which I'm doing at the moment. And there is a crack in the window, so you may or not be able to hear the birds chirping outside. And once I'll use my app to record. And once I've published an episode, my Anchor app will then take care of the distribution by updating Spotify, Radio Public, and all these other sites where my podcast is hosted. Then once all that is done, I get to play in the next episode, and I keep a running list on my phone of all the topics and areas and ideas that I feel I should do or need to research more about. And it feels like with each article and book I read, I add something new to it, like a different perspective, a different topic, a different relationship. But I love it. Like I'm such a total nerd that way. And that's pretty much my whole process. But since it's only me doing all this work in combination with my full-time job and family life and all the other things I do and wanting to do my self-care and take time for myself, it can sometimes take me a while to get things together. So I thank you for your patience. Like a former boss of mine said, life happens. And I've never forgotten her saying that. But I ask that you hang in there with me because I do plan to grow this and get more interviews with people that can offer different aspects, perspectives, and information about PMDD. And I'm pretty damn excited about it, to be honest. I'm very fortunate in where I am in my employment that I have access to, over 40 doctors, some specifically in OB or women's health or psychology. So I do plan to tap into those resources and get their opinions, get their thoughts, get their own experiences, as well as maybe with those doctors in training to get their perspective as well. So I have hopes, I have plans, I have goals for this. And I thank you for listening and supporting me along the way. And I hope we can continue this relationship, even though I don't get to hear you all. But you can reach out to me on Twitter, Instagram. Again, you can send me voice messages or questions using Anchor, which I can then pop into an episode and answer you directly. So thank you for listening, and I will talk to you all again next time. Take care.